Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Empower Man podcast. It's your boy, Mikey G, coming to you live from the very free state of Florida. And I am joined by the man who can have a pre-workout and a cup of coffee back to back and be asleep in an hour. The man
Pretty
who's
much.
quick on the draw and doesn't need a straw. The man whose chamber's always loaded, but he never gets goaded. He likes fast cars and biker bars. The man who made real estate great again. My boy and yours, Mr. Greg A. Tadora the first. Greggy T, how are you, man?
What's up, Mike? That is pretty much your best intro. I love it. Thank you. It always gets me pumped up. What gets me more pumped up, though, is our guest we have this morning for you guys. It's been a long time in the making. We're super excited. He took the time to be with us. We have the one and only Kyle Newell, otherwise known as the Panda Man.
What's up,
Panda Man.
boys?
Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Kyle, give us a little bit more about your upbringing. As I was doing my research on you, your mom was working 18-hour days. I can relate to that. My mom had 2 or 3 jobs growing up, and your grandfather's hands, those masonry hands, those big, thick hands that, I know in my professional wrestling training, I was, Johnny Rods and Harley Race, the guys that trained me in pro wrestling, they had those thick, those thick hands where they were like catcher's mitts. And when they got a hold of you, they just kind of got a hold of you. You couldn't go anywhere. And you're like, how is this possible? I work out 5 days a week and these guys are in their 60s and 70s and they have a death grip on my trap. And then of course there's a great story of Danny Hodge, who was a former wrestler that used to bend railroad tracks, the nails, right, with his bare hands. But you'll give us some more upbringing about what your mom and dad did about acquiring that work ethic, because that work ethic to us resonates pretty well. Because I feel that work ethic that we grew up is kind of gone in today's society. Definitely. If you just give us a little background more about your mom and dad and your work ethic, man, great to hear.
Sure. So we were born in Michigan. I got 3 brothers, so it's 4 boys, no girls. There's 4 of us, all pretty close in age. Born, my older brother, I'm the second oldest, was born in 80. I was 81. There was 83, 85. So 4 boys in 80 and 85, really close in age. And we moved to New Jersey in like 1988. I believe it was 1988. And from that, as we grew up, all my brothers were very, very smart academically, with SATs. They all got well over 1,400. I think the lowest like 1,450 or something. Whereas the first time I took the SATs was 970, and I had to take all these courses, did these courses, got it up to like 1,100, whatever. So they always kind of just had the edge in that realm. And obviously we all played sports growing up. My dad, now you look at it as a father, I got 3 kids. He coached us in everything, so you look back and how did he do that? Like, we're all playing the same seasons, same sports, and he was at every game coaching. And as we continue to grow up, my mom, as you mentioned, she was a special ed teacher, but where she taught a lot of high Indian population. So she taught during the day, but the Indian population takes the academics very seriously. So she would wind up tutoring. So like she'd get home a lot of nights, 10:30, 11 at night, just tutoring nonstop. And she would eat, with my dad. She'd be back up at 5 o'clock the next day, because I'd be up a lot of the times as I got older, training, whatever I was doing. So I always saw that, that unbelievable work ethic, energy off the charts. She never complained, never got sick, just a machine, going. And going back to the sports, I got really into lifting basically through, basketball was my main sport. We played everything, but in high school, I was saying I'm going all in on basketball. So the visualization, the mind training, that was all just stuff I was studying to get better at basketball. And then I started falling in love with lifting. But with my brothers, great athletes as well. But I always had the mindset that it wasn't necessarily competing with them, but I was just going to make up for whatever I didn't have to, just working harder. training, just training consistently and just nonstop, whatever I put my mind to. So it's great because my brothers now are, they're my biggest supporters. We do some different business things together, but they're always right there, supporting me and help me become better. And my grandfather, who you mentioned, he was essentially like almost like a father to me as well. Just me and him, I always had this close bond. So we go to the movies a couple times a month, get pizza. Just always talking about. He would entertain a lot of the weird stuff I wanted to talk about. Aliens, things of this nature. I'm always, everybody else is like, there's no interest in that, but he would talk to me about life and that type of stuff. And he was a stonemason, Italian, stonemason. Beautiful work he would do. We worked with him when we were teenagers growing up, and it was just brutal. And he would always say, "This is why you got to get educated, so you don't have to do this." And there's some truth to that, right? But got to learn, some business aspects from working with him. And then when we were kids as well, I think I was 10 or 11 when I started my first business. My brothers helped me, but it was a landscaping, just lawn cutting. We had t-shirts made, flyers, and we drive I begged my dad to get us a little like ride-on tractor. We drive it to wherever we could cut, anybody in the local neighborhood. That's what we did. So we didn't have to rely on my parents. But before we got to the first season, I remember it was just a push mower, and some of these yards would take me like 4 hours to cut. They're unbelievable. And at the time, my main competitor, another kid my age, who I graduated with, he now owns like a multi-$100 million construction business. But this kid was like, you could tell, but that drove me. I watched what he was doing, and it was just a cool thing looking back on it. That at that age, I had this competition within business, and I got to learn from watching this kid. And I believe he was also he was a special ed kid. I told you my mom taught special ed. He just had this work ethic, and that always stuck. I see his trucks everywhere. I mean, he does projects all over the Northeast now, which is pretty cool. So that's a little bit about the upbringing with the competitiveness, the mindset, the brothers, all that.
Let me ask you a quick question. Did you always, because it seems to me you had that ability where you were tapped into your mindset at a super young age?
Yeah. So, it kind of, I think where that really started, just really realizing the power of the mind. So when we moved to New Jersey, we stayed with my grandparents in a town called Bound Brook. My grandfather, it was my mother's parents for a year, in a little ranch house. So there were 6 of us and 2 of them. But it was within the first week or two. I remember there was like three of the boys were sleeping in one room. I think my youngest brother was with my parents. We went to bed, and I was still awake. My mom came in, so I got to talk to you guys. And this kid from our neighborhood in Michigan, he was probably like 10, so a little bit older than me at that point. I was like 7 or 8. She said, I can't remember what his name was, but she said so and so died. He had this brain aneurysm, and it was like, I remember I sprinted into the room just crying. Like I couldn't comprehend that somebody my age had died. Like it just hit me. And for the next like 4 years, obsessed with that thought, crying every day about the finality of death, trying to get my head around it. I would go outside and I would stand when it would be foggy out. I would stand in the fog and be like, maybe this is what heaven feels like. Just really introspective and really just kind of thinking about my thoughts, in that type of stuff. And then with sports, as years, I eventually came out of that phase, but I think that helped me a lot. I think that helped me throughout the years. I would go back and really just kind of give death in this, life, a lot of thought, like deep thought. And now I'm completely at peace with it, so it was a blessing. But with that and just being aware of my own thoughts, for example, with like sports in high school, I was very introverted, very shy, didn't like going to parties. Didn't have my first girlfriend until I was a junior in college. But I would always go in and say, okay, I can just go train harder. I can train harder in basketball. I could go to the gym for 3 hours, and then studying, like I said, the visualization stuff in high school, really realizing that I was going to make up for a lot just by figuring out how my mind worked, looking at it still as I kept, I'm always reading, always got books everywhere, always trying to learn about the mind, because to me, everything begins and ends with the mind. So I think a lot of it was the introspective aspect, dealing with death at that age, and then just really realizing that I was curious about how the mind worked, and I knew that that was going to be the really the thing I could always fall back on, where whatever I lacked otherwise, as far as looks or intelligence, I could go back to the mind.
That's incredible to be that young. Did you have friends that were you able to share this with, or
No, so
that's a tough, that's young to be that tapped in. It's
oh
amazing.
yeah, yeah, it really, my mom, after school, so at that age, she would pick us up. My dad was running a restaurant, pick us up or whatever after school, we'd get home. And I remember I would, you know, talk to her for literally like an hour a day about this death thing, cry, blah, blah. And then I'd go out and play with my friends. But I want to talk to them about it, right? Like I wanted nobody else. I think my brothers might have known, but I remember just my mom being she told me after the fact, being very worried about me, at that age. But it was, I've always just been interested in a lot of stuff that other people, maybe they're interested in, but they don't talk about it, or they didn't, especially at that age. And for a long time, until I embraced that, more so within the past, let's say 3, 4 years, really, where I just, this is who I am, and I don't care what anybody thinks, and I really never really cared too much. Like trying to fit in with these social situations would bother me, because I'm like, why don't I like doing this stuff? Going to parties, throughout high school. I was in a fraternity in college, but I would, they knew I just wanted to train. Like, I almost stopped when we were pledging. I did stop. And then they said, listen, we're going to let you eat whenever you want to eat and train whatever you want to train. You don't have to do the same thing as the other guys. Because I was like, this is what I want to do. I don't want to do this stuff. So, yeah, it was, as I got older, just embracing that we're all weird and we're all unique, but most people just want to try to fit in, you know.
For sure. I know Mike's got a ton of questions. This is my last question for on this topic, because I saw a video of yours where you had the marbles in the bins.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah, where did that come from?
So the first coach I ever hired to coach me was 2007 or 8, Scott Abel. A lot of people don't know Scott, and I wouldn't expect him to, but to me, he was like a celebrity. But he up in Canada, the reason I connected with him, unbelievable training mind and nutrition mind and all this stuff. But he was very into the self-awareness, mind, body, spirit. And I think he had written an article about it, or it was in one of his books, and he had mentioned something about that. And so I think it was 10 or 12 years ago. I was still teaching, because I was a teacher for about 8 years. I bought the 2 bins with the marbles. I calculated if I was going to make it to 85, 1 marble for each week. And I take 1 marble out, so I got to do that today, and I put it into the blue bin, out of the red bin into the blue bin. But if you look at the red one right now, there's about 2, 3 inches gap from the top, and originally it was all the way to the top.
Wow.
So I look at it, and just a reminder, it's a reminder that, hey, this week is gone. That's all. I can't get it back.
Yeah, Mike knows when I saw that, it really resonated with me, and it hit me hard in a good way, but also in a weird way for me, because my father passed away very young and he was super healthy. Mike knew him. He was retired. He was 65, living a life with my mom in Florida, and then just died in his sleep.
Mm.
Perfectly healthy, no nothing. Everyone in his family, like you said, with the whole Mason background, the Italians, I think the average lifespan was 97. My great grandma was 101, 98, 95, 93, and 65. I
Okay.
spoke to him that night. I was going to the gym. And then in the morning, my mom called hysterical, and I thought the cat died. And she was like, "We lost your father." And it was wild. So when I saw your video, it hit me hard. And it really makes me take some notes on, being present no matter what the situation is. I have 2 little kids, and not to take anything for granted at all. It was a real eye opener.
For sure, man. I'm sorry to
Yeah.
hear that. It's
Yeah. Thank you. Thank
it
you.
is, man. You never know.
Never
Everybody
know.
got forever, but we
Yeah.
don't. I know my wife was just saying, one of the guys that we have 2 gyms here. One of the guys that was a member for a long time, his wife's got pancreatic cancer. She's going to die soon. She's posting, my wife's seeing all these posts. And it's really shaking her up because it's a young mother. But I always remind her, I'm like, look, we're all going to die.
Yeah.
Just don't know. You know, she asked me last week, she goes, would you rather know like that or not know? I said, part of me would rather know because, you know, it's just like, again, we're all going to die.
Yeah.
And people, I do think people would live differently if they knew, okay, I got 2 years left. I got a year left. Right. And you might, like
Sure.
your father, you might have minutes left. You might have an hour left.
Yeah.
You
It's a
know,
trip. It's a trip because I totally get it. When our number's up, it's up. We have no control. My father died suddenly. My wife's father deteriorated. He had Parkinson's for 15, 20 years, which is a long time to have that. And then the last 10 were bad. And out of those 10, the last probably 4 were just horrific. And he was a real guy's guy, like motorcycles and guns and hunting and super active to can't shower, can't tie his shoes. So I saw both ends of the spectrum. So it's a good question. Like, would you rather know? I think I would, because I would do some things more calculated.
sure.
Yeah.
Sure, man. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're often reminded, at least I am, when I talk about the Bible, always talks about, our life on this earth, our time is fleeting. And we just did an episode called The Time Is Now, about how we need to take action and there's a lack of urgency. Before the pandemic, working for companies, there's a sense of urgency. Treat every action like it's make or break. Everything is urgent, like get it done. And since the pandemic, we've seen a lot of changes in work ethic, in other areas that revolves around the American dream.
Accountability.
Accountability. And we've covered that on previous episodes in regards to that type of sense of urgency and understanding, like, listen, if not now, when? And if not you, who? Who's going to do it? Like, if, and these are just great reminders and techniques of understanding how important it is to live every day and like it's the last day, because you never know what's going to happen. And I love your strength and conditioning background, and I kind of want to tie that mindset into fasting, because fasting goes back into biblical principles.
Oh, yeah.
And even with a lot of the religions you see out there that do fasting with Ramadan and the other Jewish holidays. And how did you first get into fasting? Like, what led you to understanding the benefits of fasting when it comes to cell autophagy and just kind of like your metabolism and lowering your biomarkers? What led you to really, make fasting a huge part of your practice?
It was at first, it was 2014. It's purely cosmetic. So that was the last time I competed in bodybuilding, and it was getting ready for 2 shows, about 8 weeks out from the shows. I had heard of fasting before, but I, like a typical bodybuilder, I'm going to lose muscle if I do this.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So
Two meatheads right here.
yeah. So I'm like, I can't do it, and then I'm reading this guy, Lyle McDonald, who I learned a lot of nutrition stuff from. He was really like, I don't know if you guys remember Dan Duquesne. He was kind of like a disciple of his, like just a sciencey. But I'm reading one of his books, and he's talking about stubborn fat, about 8 weeks out from the show. And at that point, from doing it wrong the years prior, like the first guy ever coached me through bodybuilding, basically we would just starve myself, like 1,500 calories for 4 months. And it got to the point where I couldn't get ripped unless I was doing that. Like, pretty big guy, 220, 230 pounds. So I'm about 8 weeks out, eating 4 meals, 1,600 calories at that point for that show. And he's talking about stubborn fat cells. And for men, it's typically our lower abdomen, our love handles; for women, glutes and thighs. And it's stubborn because it's a different type of receptor. And he says, really, the only way you can increase blood flow to those areas, as step 1 of fat loss is mobilization, is to fast. Fasting increases blood flow to those areas. I'm like, well, my wife had never seen me compete at that point, because it had been a 6-year break in between the prior contest. I said, man, I'm going to start this tomorrow. So I took, and I knew exactly what I was eating. So I just took those 4 meals, made it 2. So your typical 16-8, lunch and dinner. And everything got easier all of a sudden, like within a day or 2. I was like, man, the hunger's more tolerable. I get to eat a little bit bigger meals because I love to eat. I got voracious appetite. And I remember we went for a walk, me and my wife, and I'm like, I'm onto something with this. I'm like, this is going to be huge. Like, this is going to be, because again, with the gym at that point, we just had one gym, but I'm like, this is something that's sustainable. And I did that pretty much. Sometimes I would do one meal a day. Like that was extreme for me at that point, you know. But I carried on after I finished the contest. It was late. I won in. They were both in June, so about this time of year. But after the contest, I continued on with it, and I was able to maintain pretty good shape for the rest of the summer. Whereas years prior, I would put on 30, 40 pounds in a week after the show, just because you completely mess up everything. And I just stayed with that for like the next 5 years to 2019. And then we were doing a fat loss contest at the gym with the staff. And I said, all right, let me dive back into the research here. And you know, because I was kind of just sitting at this, you know, comfortable weight, whatever. And I started doing the longer form fasting, you know, researching the 48s and stuff like that. So that first summer, which was 2019, of that, I pretty much went all summer doing like a 72 every week. 72 hours, and I was just experimenting. I remember, so I started out, it was like in April that year with the 48. I remember just feeling like, you know, kind of to the name of your podcast, but like empowered. I'm like, wasn't that hard. And I've never gone a day in my life without eating, which was a weird thought, like the first time you do it. Like, man, people actually do this all the time. And I just started playing around with it. And my body, at that point, I was 250 pounds, 16% body fat. So I wasn't like obese or anything, but I didn't feel right. Like my shirts were all tied around my neck, and I was like, I just don't feel the healthiest. So I went from about 250 that first summer to about 225, which is still where I sit. You know, I got there and I just maintained, and it just became my way of living. And then that, you know, I was documenting everything. And then it was right around COVID, when COVID hit, you know, that craziness. I remember I ran my first, what I called a Panda Challenge. So actually, I'll tell you how I brainstormed it. It was December, right before COVID, right? So December of 19. And we went to my buddy's, he had a holiday party up in Hoboken, so near city. That was like early December. The next Monday, I was like, man, I don't feel right. Something does not feel right. And wound up, you know, my wife maybe wound up going like 5 days in to see the doctor, and they test, oh, you got the flu, got flu B, whatever. I don't think I ever had the flu before. Could have been one of the early cases of whatever, because I was near a city. But I was like delirious, dude. I would be shaking on the ground and just convulsing. Just bad, rough shape. So it's funny looking back, because she had me like quarantined in a bed. We didn't buy into any of the COVID stuff. This is before that, but she has me. We had a newborn, Emma, our daughter, a couple months old. She's like, you're staying in the bedroom. You know, you're staying there. But I had my notebook with me, and I just kind of mapped out, what is it? How do I take people through this? How do I actually teach them what I've been doing? Because it sounds so extreme. And I remember just in like a state of delirium, just mapping it out. It's gonna be a 6-week thing. So I, you know, no, I take people to like a 6-week Panda Challenge, and I teach them. Mapped it all out, and you fast forward a couple months, COVID comes. I didn't stop. I still went to the gym every day. I didn't stop anything with my routine. And I launched the first Panda Challenge, took people through it in the midst of that, and people were crushing it. And I just kept researching. I was getting data because I had other people doing it, and it was during COVID too. I was going into the office every day. I wrote the book, you know, the Panda Diet book. So I write every day. I just bang it out, and that's really how it kind of started. And now it's just really, it's just part of who I am. Like, it's like I don't, unless I'm on vacation or something, I don't miss. Doesn't matter, you know.
Let me ask you this. Well, we'll start with this one. So when you're on vacation and you indulge, like you said, you pretty much eat
Yeah.
what you want, do whatever. Does it come out a lot faster?
Yeah. So you mean like having a bowel movement or something like
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
So your body, it really adapts to it. And what I've seen, so on vacation, right? Because I always incorporate this should enhance your life, whatever you're doing. It shouldn't be your life, like when people obsess over stuff. So on vacation, I'll give myself the freedom where, okay, if I want to have lunch and dinner, totally fine. But I love my feast at dinner, right? So we just went to Jamaica, me and my wife, a couple weeks ago.
My favorite country.
Jamaica was great, dude.
I love Jamaica.
Yeah, really cool, man. We're definitely going back. But even out of those days, and we're at an all-inclusive place, I had 2 lunches just because I don't feel as good when I do that now. So I give myself the freedom to do it. But yeah, I noticed the body will definitely take what it needs and it excretes the rest pretty efficiently, the longer you do this. So yeah, there's definitely a component to that.
So a guy like me, I'm 6'1", I'm like 275. I'd like to get back down to 225. Now, being the old school mentality that I have, which is completely wrong, the fasting to me is, it seems like it's hard. I think I'm mentally up for the challenge, but then I'm like, all right, if I work out, that 45-minute window, I know you touch upon this in some of your videos, it's not really a thing. Am I going to get weaker, lose strength, lose muscle mass, all of that? Take a guy like me through that.
Yeah. So and that's a big question I get, right? And what I've seen, and I always use myself as the experiment for. I've got buddies that do this, right, that are in strength and conditioning. They've adopted it, and what I've seen over time is your performance actually increases because you're still going to have your glycogen reserves within the muscle and the liver, and you have less obstruction, right, within the body with food. So performance will actually increase. I have ultra endurance athletes that I actually coach through this too, right? Once we get adapted and we're taking in the salts, performance is not going to go down. It's really just a mentality. But so I'm like, if you have your sodium, you're doing that, you put some potassium in there, performance should be on point. You're not going to lose muscle fat. So fasting is actually very, muscle preserving because growth hormone goes way up, right? And you looked at survival. So with the mind map stuff that I do, everything that the body and brain does is for survival first and foremost.
Yep.
That's primary importance. So if we were going to go back a couple thousand years and you weren't going to have necessarily 3 meals a day, you had to go out and hunt and fight and all this stuff. Two things had to get enhanced. Like a lot of people, right? I'm going to lose muscle if I get a day without food. Well, if that was the case, we wouldn't be here because you had to have that muscle to go out and fight and hunt and all this type of stuff. Bring the food back. If you got a big kill. So fasting is very muscle preserving. Luteinizing hormone, precursor to testosterone, goes up. Growth hormone goes way up. Brain function is enhanced, right? So that's one of the things too. Is like the movement enhances brain function. So to me, and I could tell you from my personal experience, I'm as muscular as I've ever been, strong as I've ever been. So it's really just a mentality.
What last question on this, because I know Mike's loaded with them. What is, or are there withdrawal symptoms for a fat ass like me?
Yeah. So one of the first things I teach when I tape it is food is a drug, right? And I have people reframe it. Like food it affects the internal biochemical hormonal environment. So what that means, when we break from that drug, you might get with some withdrawal symptoms. It might be a little headache, might be shakiness, might be. But from my experience now, taking hundreds of people through it passes very quickly. I'm talking like a day or two.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not like this long drawn out thing. And once that passes, and you're like within the first week, you start to get used to it. And I always tell people the first one you do is the hardest. Your first 48 or that first week. Once you get rolling, man, it just you realize the hunger. So with typical, one of the early things I teach too is you got two metabolic pathways basically. We're playing the calorie game, the caloric game, right? And we've all done this. Cut calories, right? And cut calories, what happens? Metabolic rate's going to lower to match what you're putting in if that's your main energy source. And ghrelin, main hunger hormone is going to continue to rise. So I don't care who you are, eventually you can't stick with it. But now you've messed up metabolic rate, hunger hormones through the roof. And this would happen when I competed early in bodybuilding. Then I'd blow up like a tick when I'd go back because I couldn't stop eating. Right? When you do fasting, metabolic rate actually goes up 5 to 13% because of mitochondrial function and the hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, this type of stuff, growth hormone, and hunger hormones, ghrelin, the main one, goes down. So the exact opposite thing happens. So to me, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with Charles Poliquin. I used to learn from Charles. I got to learn from him in person about 4 times before he passed. But I learned a lot about the hormones from him, with this biosignature and all that. So now I just started tying the hormones together with it. I'm like, all right, I can't, it just makes sense to me, like with the hormones and then the habits, right? And again, like I'm doing this particular, Panda now over 4 years. I mean, you can't diet for 4 years. So it's not a diet. It's just a principle of living.
That's right. And it's so funny, the nomenclature of diet versus habits, because diets don't, there's an end date,
It's
right?
ended.
Where habits tend to, you want them to have that for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
And, I love your whole Panda, genesis of being ferocious when you have to be, and then gentle when you have to be. And it's
Yeah.
such a great yin and yang that you coach with your clients. How do you manage a client who, because we have clients that are extreme, right? So that will like obsess over it, like you mentioned earlier. How do you find that balance within your clients? Do you have like a one size fits all approach, or are the fast specific to the individual? Do you do any type of intake process? Like, do you use InBody? Do you do calipers or whole health risk panel? Take us through that process of putting someone on a fast, like Greg
Yeah.
or myself.
Sure. So at the gyms, we have the InBody. We used to do the biosignature with the calipers, 12 set, but it's really cool stuff. But it's just when you have a lot of people, it's not, and it's a little over the top, but looking. So sometimes I'll do biosignature, but the InBody. So doing it with all the local clients on the InBody, we could show them the visceral fat, right?
Mhm.
And almost every person that I coach, either at the gym and I do it a little bit different with the online because I'm not with the person.
Right.
The visceral fat is way too high, and they've all come from a background of they've tried every diet. They've done this and they're frustrated. It doesn't work. So I tell them, like, if I'm taking them through a 6-week thing, hey, this is what works. This is what works, and you got to trust me for the 6 weeks. And I'll coach you through it. But then when I start the people, I start them with the black version of the Panda, right? Then I adjust. So it's a 48 followed by 1 meal a day. So let's run that. Let's see first week what happens. Let me know your weight. Let me know this type of stuff. I want to see pictures. I want to know your biofeedback. How's your digestion, sleep, performance? Or place more emphasis on that stuff, right? Like if you tell me your energy is improving, but nothing has moved on the scale, okay, we're on the right track though. Now, if the scale's moving, but your energy starts dropping and it sucks, all right, we got to fix something because again, you're not going to stick with that. It's not going to work. So the online clients, hey guys, we're starting with the black version. Like, and for example, I have this guy from Hawaii right now, signed on for the year with me. He was at one point before he came to me, like he started with fasting. He read the book, but he was over 500 pounds, big Samoan guy. Now he's just about to crack 400. So he's been with me about 3 weeks now. And we started with the 48, then we did a 72 last week. This week we're doing 96. Again, he's big.
Oh,
He's a big guy.
6 hour fast.
Yeah, yeah. So he'll hit that. And I'll start getting it there. I'll
that's
start hitting.
incredible.
Yeah.
That's insane, man.
And you get people really to reframe it. Food is a drug, and the body fat we have is food. It's a fuel source. And you have to give your body a reason to tap into that. But if insulin is raised, it all comes down to insulin. What I teach, it's a storage hormone. It's signaling the body, hold on to this. So I'm like, I don't, because people say I'm eating clean. I'm like, it doesn't matter. You're constantly hitting the insulin button. So many people, and it used to be me. My wife used to say, I don't understand. You eat this before, the fasting. You eat so well. You're training all the time. Why don't you look like? And she wasn't saying it like to be nasty to me, but it was like I would expect you to be like ripped all the time, and I would get frustrated because I'm like, I'm eating 1,800 calories a day. I'm not talking about even with the contest. I'm talking about like in the summer, wanting to get lean.
Yep.
I would get frustrated, man. I would get really frustrated, and then I put up, I think it was early May, maybe like May 1st. She had sent me a picture, even from when I was doing the 16-hour fast a couple years prior. I think we had just had our second child. That compared to now, and that's the only thing that's changed. Still, I was training all the time. I do my TRT, the testosterone therapy. Nothing else has changed, but my body is dramatically different with the longer fast, like unbelievably different from a 16-hour fast. So people will come to me with that. Oh, I've done that. I'm like, that's not the same. I'm like, that's not. And I tell people, I'm like, a 16-hour fast is not going to do anything. It's better than eating like 5-6 meals a day, but it's not really going to move the needle.
So,
Interesting.
how do you tailor that to the older population? And I ask this question because I have a client who is 66 years old, insulin resistant, started messing around with the fast, loves fasting. You know, it's kind of like it was with yo-yo, and then he stayed consistent, and he's down about 20 pounds from 280 to about 260. And the biggest thing that I saw was that adipose tissue around the abdomen was so much easier to grab
Sure.
when I grabbed the calipers. And he performs at a high level for 67, strong, balance, cardio. How do you adjust the fast for like someone in the older population versus someone like Greg in our age, middle age, or someone who's like younger? How do you I guess my question is like, how do you take that fast through the different demographics?
So even with the older population, when you said that, one of the guys that just went through one of our pandas at the one of our local clients, he's about that age. He might even be 70, and just crushed it. So I don't change it at all, because they're obviously they're further along in life, and they might have more insulin resistance built up, but it's the same concept, same philosophy, right? It's like, okay, do this, and with him, and this guy wasn't even a big guy, but he's down 20 pounds. He was probably maybe 180, but he's a smaller guy, and feels great now. Looks way younger. He's in the gym a couple to, probably 3-4 times a week, training with my staff, and he just preaches it to everybody now because his energy's good, all this type of stuff. And it's, especially as we get older, obviously I'm not that age yet, but appetite will typically go down, right? So it kind of fits into what, the natural rhythm of life, but I don't tweak it based on that. Where I've seen with like different populations, I used to buy into it. Again, when I really first started studying this, what I had been led to believe is women shouldn't fast longer than like 14 hours, going to mess with their hormones.
Right.
What I've seen is the exact opposite, because I get a lot of women that'll be like, I've tried another woman about that age. I think she was 65, 66. This is the first or second panda I run like 3 years ago, 3 years ago. She came to me, she said, Kyle, I've done everything. She's been through menopause twice because she had a hysterectomy. She goes, I just came off 1,100 calories for 40 days. I lost 1 pound. She goes, nothing works.
Wow.
Will this work? I said, I think it's going to work. And I think part of it too is the confidence I bring to it. Like, I'm like, this works. Just trust me, it'll work, and I'll figure it out for you. She dropped 20 pounds in 6 weeks, and it was amazing. Yeah. And so with the women with premenopause, perimenopause, postmenopause, they do better with the longer fasting. I mean, they tell me with the symptoms they have, the hot flashes, the tender breasts, all this type of stuff, all these symptoms improve, right? Because insulin, something Poliquin taught me, is one of your 3 master hormones. That's really the only one we have a large degree of control over. So that's where I would say, like with the women, because I still get that. Well, I shouldn't fast that long because I'm a woman. I'm like, I disagree, and here's the data I have from what I've seen. So women really crush it with the longer fasting, and women seem to have an easier time with it than men.
Wow.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What do you do during your, I mean, I've heard of things about taking like bone broth, hydration, coffee, during that fast.
Pre-workouts?
Pre-workouts.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Red Bulls. I don't know.
Well, I try to, like, for that, like with Red Bulls and stuff. Yeah, and I swear I was probably one of the first people drinking those Bang energy drinks, going back to like 2013.
Or
Nobody,
Loco.
yeah, yeah. And I don't even know how I came across it on some website, and we had them at the gym, calorie free, right? But now when I tell people, the longer I progress, I'm like, with that type of stuff, I'm like, just there might be no calories in, but look at the back of it. Your liver's got to detoxify all this stuff. Right? But big fan of coffee. Big fan of coffee. Pre-workouts, like if you look again, if it's calorie free, you're probably going to be fine. Like, I start people out pretty strict because they want to have all. I said, let's get your taste buds the first couple of weeks just back online. So black coffee, I'll tell people, let's go black. Let's see it in your body. You kind of get used to it, right? So that the waters, we call it the juice, which is your sodium, your potassium, and baking soda. So we do that within there, and that's like, even if people weren't fasting, I'm like, I would put you on sodium. Most people are very deficient, but it's almost like a lot of not. I do think a lot of it's intentional. The advice we've been given through the mainstream with any
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, it's good. Like, this is to make people less healthy, and it makes perfect sense. It's like the whole model, the whole system collapses if everybody's fasting and healthy. Everything, like everything collapses. But yeah, you can do that stuff within the fast bone broth. You could do, like, I've studied a lot of Dr. Jason Fung. He's got a clinic up in Canada, and all he does is revert. His whole clinic, the whole premise is reversing type 2 diabetes through fasting. And he has his people, and they're not even doing like 48s. They're doing like 20 and 24s. But he'll have them do bone broth and all that. So I tell people, I'm like, you could do that, right? But I usually have people go stricter, right? And we drink the juice, either coffee, and to be honest, I told you I started doing the dry fasting. The first one, just like the regular 48, was the hardest. And I toyed around with that the first summer, but I don't think I was mentally ready for it. But I do find the dry fasting almost easier in some ways. You know, in the research I've done on that, with how sometimes the water could kick up like the digestive enzymes and hydrochloric acid within the stomach and kind of mess with hunger signals. So in some ways, I find the dry fasting, and dry fasting is cool because it's basically 3 times more potent as far as fat loss and the autophagy and all this stuff. Like dry fasting is insane. You know, so I'm really just starting to go down that road, and it's only a matter of time before I hit like a long one. You know, just kind of planning it out when I'm going to hit a longer one. But yeah,
Can you
that's
do?
yeah,
Sorry to interrupt. Can you do both at the same time, dry and?
yeah. So a
Okay.
couple, probably right before we went to Jamaica, I think it was the week before. I was doing a 72. Well, the week, so, you know, the week prior to that week I'm talking about, I did a 72 hours, so 3-day dry fast, right? And it was a hard dry fast, meaning no water contact. And first of all, right, they tell us what you're going to die if you go 3 days without
Yeah.
water. I'm working out every day during this. It's like it's not true, right? And it's like, where did this come from? You're going to die for 3 days if you don't have water. Your body can produce a liter of its own water, pure, clear, clean water on its own each day, and it gets the hydrogen from the fat cell. So that's really cool. Then it's a whole cleansing process. But the second week, when I was doing a 3-day dry, that was my plan. Was a 3-day dry. 2 days in, so 48 in, and I you know mess around with about twice a year. I'll do like a psychedelic trip, you know, just to really. And I sit out in front, you know. Now I've got it down where, and I started doing that around you know that COVID year, you know, sit out front and I just kind of sit there with my Bible, my notebook, and I brought a mason jar of water out, you know, just kind of praying to God, and it was it was almost like, you know, now with my fasting, I just, anything beyond the 48 or whatever, I just let the inspiration come to me. You know, I believe God's just saying, this is what you do now. And I just let it come to me. And I sat there with the water, and it was harder for me. And I did wind up drinking it because God was like, just enjoy this cup. There's no food. Just enjoy the blessing of water. The reason I'm telling you that, though, so that I continued with the fast for that next day, but it wasn't dry. But going from the 2-day dry to the water fast, it's almost like I wasn't fasting. Like it was almost like I was, you know, the water just gave me such energy, you know, and putting a little sodium in that the day 3, I'm like, man, this is, so yeah, you could definitely combine them. You could do like a 24 dry into a 24 water fast.
That first sip, how quick did you feel the rush?
Pretty quick, man. Like you don't realize how much of a performance answer, you know, sodium and water are, right? Until you take them out and all that. But yeah, the pumps and the energy you'll get just from that is pretty crazy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Can I get your thoughts on TRT?
Yeah, big time, man. A huge fan of it. You know, so I have all the guys. I recommend them to say, okay, go get your blood work, right? Go get your blood work and let's see where you're at. And you have free in total. So I usually just kind of, most doctors are not well versed in this, right? So they're gonna the free is the more important one to look at, but that's not what doctors base it on. So I said, let's look at your total. Don't, you know, just let's see where it's at. And of course, with the norms, right? As you guys might know, with the depending what lab, 200 to like 1200 might be the norm, which is ridiculous. It's 2 different universes. All the years I've been having guys get blood work, you know, obviously I'm not a doctor, but I said, bring it. I can look at it and give you my input based on everything I've studied. I've had 2 guys that have high upper limit normal naturally. All the years of my life, 2 guys, that's it. One of them was one of the Rutgers strength coaches, one of the assistants. But everybody else, man, they come back like 200, 300, 400. And I'm like, listen, you want to be upper limit normal. You want to be in that 1,900 at the lowest, man. And I tell them, I'm like, you have more testosterone receptors on your heart and your brain than anywhere else in your body. So you're just going to feel better when you're on it. It's hard. I'm like, it's hard to explain until you experience it. It's not a stimulant. When you go on it, you're just going to feel more life. So I'm a huge proponent of it. You know, I think it's definitely a good thing. A lot of guys are, again, they've been led to believe that it's this thing that just gets them, right. And so when I actually do seminars on like testosterone and all that, and I kind of break down the history of it, right. And a lot of guys our age probably were impacted by things like Lyle Alzado. Remember we played for the Raiders?
Yeah.
He came out, so I got this brain tumor from steroids. Well, in that particular example, being in the bodybuilding world, I would always be on the forums, like just trying to learn stuff. And obviously that instance would come up. And I think it was a doctor or somebody on there was like, listen, the brain tumor that he had was, you don't get that from testosterone. That's basically was found in people that were HIV positive. So the long and short, what they were saying is, and it was known, I guess, in those circles, Lyle Alzado, where he was the man's man, but apparently he was homosexual, and he could have come out and like he was the guy's guy. So he had HIV, developed this, but he came out. He wasn't going to say that. He said, "Oh, steroids did this to me," and then obviously media takes that, runs with it, and everybody has this in their brain that, oh man, it killed him.
Yeah.
I'm always like, all these pro athletes, dude, 95% of them are using stuff. You can't compete at that level without it. You can't recover.
I agree.
You know, like, so where are all the dead bodies from this? And I'll do something in this seminars where the last one I did, I think it was in the past 25 years, there have been like 5 deaths attributed to anabolics. 5. There's more people died of shark attacks each year than in this total time span. So it's just like a lot of people just had that fear, just like fasting. I'm like, try it and then see what happens. Like, but I always tell people from my experience, I don't tell anybody to try something I haven't tried and really researched. You got to make your own decision, but it's a life changer in my opinion.
When, if you don't mind me asking, when did you start? Because you hear it's good, but people start too young, or when's the right? It goes off your blood work.
Sure. So I started, the first 5 contests I did were natural bodybuilding shows, right? So real strict with that. It was after I finished that. So it was 2010. Went to my doctor, who I was good buddies, who we became good. I was going to him since high school. Told him, hey, I want to try this. And he said, all right, let's do it. Let's do it. And we'll do your blood work and we'll see. But he had me typically, like they were doing bodybuilding. Let's go 10 weeks on, 10 weeks off. Come off and you're a freaking mess, right? Especially if you don't do post cycle. And then throughout the years, pretty much the only time I've come off since then is when we wanted to get pregnant. It's a male birth control. And even so, when we got pregnant with my daughter, so we were opening our second gym right around that time. We'd had a miscarriage where it's a lot of energy, good business going, right? And my wife was like, just go back on. You need your energy. You're better. You perform better on that. Go back on. We'll kind of table this. So I said, all right, let me do a little experiment. I went back on like a half cc a week. So nothing, just to feel better. And I started running the post-cycle therapy at the same time, the Clomid and HCG. And we got pregnant while I was on it. And I was like, I never have to come off again because now I know how to run the post-cycle at the same time. And she got pregnant. And, it's you guys, you're familiar with Louis Simmons?
Of course.
Yes,
Barbell. Absolutely.
Yeah, Louis is the man. And, he was in one of my books. I actually got to speak with him 6 times.
Did you really?
And I remember what he said in that movie, though. He was like, your morals aren't my morals aren't your morals. He's like, just leave me alone and I won't bother you. And something he said in there, though, he was on 40 straight, probably by the time he died, 50 straight years. So now when guys tell me, should I cycle? I'm like, don't you want to get pregnant? And I say, you don't even have to do it, Dad. I'm like, why would you come off if you feel better? My body's not going to produce. I'm like, it's already not producing. Like, and I've tried, even before that stuff, I tried doing all the stuff to get the natural level up. I got it up to like 500, and I'm like, so that's my opinion on it.
And when you take it consistently, your levels will stay at that high level pretty straight.
Yeah, they should, yeah, they should. And I always tell guys, get your blood work, see where you're at. Me and my brothers, right? Obviously the same genetics. So they all run it too. And so some people are like, a lot of the pro bodybuilders, some of them are using extreme amounts. Some of them don't have to use extreme amounts because they're very responsive to it, like with the androgen receptors and all that. So they don't have to use thousands of milligrams a week. And I tell people that too. I'm like, you're not going to be using this stack like some of these guys use, but some of them don't even have to. So me and my brothers are all what I would call like hyper responders to it. We don't get any of the gyno or tender breasts or anything like that, but we could hit a half cc a week if we want, and that might put us out of the upper limit normal range, above 1500, which whatever, it doesn't even give you that, like it says too high. So then you just cut down on it. And I tell people too, you should definitely donate blood every quarter when you're doing this, because the red blood cell count goes up, hematocrit. So that's one of the main physical things you'll notice is your endurance is going to go up, which is great. But I'm like, it's because of the red blood cells. So go donate blood. And that was something I learned from Poliquin, right? Was, hey, you should be donating blood every quarter if you're on TRT. So I do that. I go to the local hospital, donate blood. They give me my hematocrit reading, which was like 16.5 a couple weeks ago, which is still within normal, normal range. And they do that, and it's all good.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
I want to touch on something real briefly. You mentioned the 7 noetic emotions that
Yeah.
people have, and the whole connection of our 9th and 10th cranial nerves that signal to our gut, the fasting, and how it all kind of correlates. How do you give us a simple tip to kind of keep these emotions in check? Because I know, like, when I have fear, I don't eat, or when I'm happy, I'll tend to like crush a pizza.
Yeah.
So it's like trying to stay, with the yin and the yang and maintaining balance. A simple, quick tip for guys and girls out there that are listening to this, that they can kind of keep these things in check, or do you feel that the fasting helps keep these in check?
Fasting definitely helps. So the fasting, like the tip of the iceberg, people come to me a lot of times, they want to lose weight, right? That's largely the main reason. But I always tell them, like, listen, there's so many health benefits, but the main benefit of it is the inner dialogue that you begin to master, right? That's the inner dialogue. With mind mapping, that which you refer to, that's part of the mind mapping stuff. The first environment is the inner dialogue. So now all of a sudden you got to go inward. Okay, hungry or feel hungry, but it's not an option to turn to food, right? So then you start saying, well, where are these thoughts coming from? So your brain will answer any question you ask of it, right? So I'm like, when you're feeling a certain emotion, just ask yourself, what am I focused on right now? And it's real simple, because most people don't ask themselves these types of questions. What am I focused on? And you'll say, well, I'm focused on all the stuff I got to do. I'm focused on what I have to do next week. And how am I going to make this payment on this mortgage, that type of stuff, right? And with that, I'm like, listen, the logical brain, the emotional brain oppose each other, right? Logic high, emotions low. Emotions high, logic's low. So be aware of your emotions. But what happens is a lot of times people will allow the emotions to just be like a runaway train, and they start driving all the thoughts, right? So you just got to use the emotions as a clue. And the fasting, it's a very stoic thing to do, right? Like you got to, like it's that discipline and that inner dialogue that you begin to master with the fasting. Like, especially like when you do, I'll tell you guys, like, this hat is for my indigo panda. I'll tell you about that in a little bit. But that was purely for the mental and the spiritual when I created that aspect of it. And it was like, you got to go inward. And it's just like in a workout, right? Like I tell people when they come work out with me Fridays, it's like, it's usually the hardest workout of the week, or Saturdays. It doesn't matter if they're members at the gym or not. I'm like, you want to come work out with me? You come work out. I'll modify stuff for you. I'm going to push you. And a lot of times you'll get these guys, like, when they're in that pain threshold, that's when they want to stop. I'm like, this is what you were chasing. This is the feeling you wanted. Why would you stop now? Like, this is it. Like, when you're in the longer fast, this is part of what you were after. So why would you give up here? Right. And you just started getting them. It's really the inner dialogue. Like, the self-awareness to me is the key to everything. Is a self-awareness, thinking about your own thoughts, taking time. And like when I do teach meditation, or, I don't, so me and my wife went and got taught in transcendental meditation back in February. Some I've always toyed with meditation and all that. But I'm like, that's the mental training, not to necessarily quiet your mind. It's when you're in those situations to be more aware of the thoughts.
That's awesome.
Let me ask you this real quick. Sorry, Mike.
No, you're good, man.
A guy like me, do you ease into it, like start with a 24 or go right into a 48, and then coming out of that, am I going to want to just have like a giant meal, which probably is not the right way to do it?
So what I teach is, it's normal to feel like, okay, I'm going to just go crazy eating when I'm out of it. But I start everybody right out the gate on a 48 to build their confidence and to knock out any fear they have, right? Because it's the unknown. And now all of a sudden you go into the 1 meal a day. That seems easy. And the way I teach to break a fast, again, directly opposes what most people would teach on this, but I've been experimenting now a long time with this. I said, okay, you come out of your, yeah, you could do your bone broth to break it. There's little stuff, but I don't get into the details with people until they get the basis down. Like, okay, come out of your fast. We're going to break it with the fruit. I don't care how much, what kind, whatever you like, because we're trying to form a habit, and fruit is digested and really not in the stomach, but in the intestine. So we want to get that through first. It's got all the micronutrients, hits the stretch receptors on your stomach, right? And it's alive. Fruit is so nutritious. So I say, okay, start with fruit when you break your fast. I don't get people, again, whatever you can form a habit on. What do you like as far as fruit? So that's how I typically start people. And then you go into your feast, which is, again, if you like to eat, this is a huge reason why this really appealed to me. I love to eat. Like, I have a huge appetite. And every time I eat, it's a feast. And I teach people to feast. It's not playing the calorie game. It's a different metabolic pathway. So you feast, and meaning I want you to eat until you're full, right? You have a lot more leeway when you're fasting with what you eat, right? Get the fasting period. And over time, we start, okay, let's get a fruit. But my typical feast would be like, if I'm at home and it's a regular night, I'll do my fruit, and then I might do a couple potatoes, my vegetable, animal protein, and I'll do like overnight oats for my dessert, and I'm eating until I full. And then boom, I repeat the next day. It's simple the way I teach it, yeah.
That's awesome. I wanna ask you these questions as we wrap up our time with you here, and thank
We
you
need a
again.
part two. I need to
Yeah,
say
we
that. We need
definitely
a part
do. This
two.
is
We have so many
this
other
has been
questions.
so
Mike has a
enlightening
ton.
and so fascinating.
Yeah.
But I kind of want to switch gears to family,
Yeah.
and and get your thoughts. First of all, like, how did you and your wife meet? Like, I'm just curious to see, because we talk a lot about relationships, because a lot of people that listen to our podcast go through similar struggles. And I would be curious, if you could share your experiences and how you met your wife, and what your uh, best practices, I'll say, or how you guide raising your children, and provide, and really just keeping the family first, and keeping that family
Yeah.
unit intact.
Good question. So we were both teachers in the same district, but it's called Bridgewater, Raritan. Elementary school, I was phys ed, she was a third grade, and we were set up on a blind date, which almost didn't happen because I had like bronchitis the day we were supposed to get. I was like, but so the interesting, the backstory before we even go into that, I had kept going, and I believe this in life. I kept going for the same type of girl, right? And it was usually coming out of a relationship, broken home, usually no father. They looked a certain, more like exotic looking, right? Like my mom is straight Italian, like jet black hair, more exotic looking. So I would go after that. I think a lot of guys do that. And every time they would always tell me, all these girls, this happened like 9 or 10 times. You're too nice. You're too nice. You're too nice. And I would be like, man, I gotta be more of an, mean or whatever it is. And I would buy into that. So the last time it happened, I was actually house sitting for a client's aunt out in California. This girl breaks up with me from, we were out here in New Jersey. I got there. She, this isn't going to work. And I remember being like depressed for a couple of days. I remember going out to the beach, and I took my notebook, and I remember saying, you know what? I love who I am. First time in my life, I remember just I was literally talking to myself out loud on the beach. I'm like, I love who I am. And I said, I'm not changing. I'm not going to be who I'm not. And I don't care. And I remember I took that notebook and I wrote out exactly, this is what I want in a wife. Wrote it all out. And I was so empowered. Like, I love who I'm not changing. Doesn't matter. So for the next 6 months, I really wasn't seeking anything. I wasn't looking for it. I was completely content just being on my own. I would go out on dates and stuff. But prior to that, it was like, I need this to work. This, that type of thing. So when I met Devin on the blind date, she's blonde hair, blue eyes, comes from a good family, smart. Not that the other girls weren't smart, but it was, good conversation. And I literally had to force myself, right? So with the brain, right, with everything's patterns. And I kept forcing myself. I'm like, listen, she's a nice girl. It's not what you're used to. You got to keep going out with her. Just keep going out with her. I had to break the pattern. And she thought I was playing a game, which benefited me because that drew her closer to me, but I wasn't. I was just like, I wasn't that into it, right? Because it was different. It wasn't the drama. Then I had to break the pattern. And I actually tried breaking up with her about 10 months into it because I was teaching. And what happened? God put this girl in our school that was a teacher, same type of girl that all the other ones were. And she was coming at me hard. you know, and she had a boyfriend and all that, but I was like, maybe I should go for that. So I broke up with Devin, never cheated on her with this girl or anything, but I broke up. And then a month or so into that, Devin wasn't having it. Right. She's like, you're either with me or you're not. And I respected that, you know, and we went out with a couple the other night, and she's like, if she's probably right. She's like, she goes, if it wasn't, she goes, he probably would never get married if it wasn't for me. Because she puts up with a lot with me. She knows, you know, I just kind of do my own thing as far as just the weird stuff I like to do. And she supports it. Like she's all in, you know, and she is a master with the kids though. Like she was a master educator, so good with the kids. So she's definitely the rock. And as far as like running the family, and I got the inspiration from some of my buddies that I've been involved with, like in masterminds with. We run like upstairs, we got the core values chart. So we have 5 core values as a family, and we do stickers, and we speak like that to the kids. You know, like one of them is be a good Samaritan. So we always use that language. You could be a good Samaritan, you know, hold the door for that person. And then we give out stickers Sunday nights. You know, we give out stickers. They can give stickers to each other. And I always look at, especially with the boy, like I didn't have any sisters, but now having a daughter, I look at it, I'm like, okay, she's probably going to wind up marrying somebody like me. So who do I want that guy to be like? I'm like, I want to be in shape. I want to be disciplined. And the boys, they're always watching, right? Like you guys have children, they're always watching. You know, kids watch. That's how they learn. They don't, it doesn't matter what you tell them. So I'm always, you know, they're always seeing me work out. They're always seeing me push myself. They're always seeing me, you know, so I just try to model what I want them to become, you know, what I want them to become eventually.
Wow. I think we could do a whole podcast on family values.
Oh, absolutely.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome.
Appreciate that insight.
That's awesome, because a lot of guys struggle with that, breaking that cycle of going after the same girl. And
Oh yeah.
you gave a great example that I know resonated with me. I'm sure it resonated with our listeners out there.
Yeah, no, it's funny you bring that up because I've been getting asked that question more lately. And I'm like, you know, and it goes down to understanding your brain. Like, okay, you keep getting this pattern. And listen, one of my one-on-one clients now, very successful business guy, got broken up with, and he's trying to figure it out. I'm like, first of all, doesn't matter. She's not into you. Like, you got to give yourself the harsh truth, right? I remember like going through that stage where like there's either, and I would tell myself, either another guy or she just doesn't like me. Take your what ifs and throw them out the window. So that's managing the inner dialogue. And you have to go through that person to get to the right situation. You can look back and say, man, what a blessing that I didn't wind up with that person. But it's hard when like emotions are high. And yeah, so I would definitely like to talk more about that. Yeah.
Absolutely. We
That's
need a
awesome.
part 2 for sure. We'll schedule that.
Anytime you guys want. It's a pleasure.
This was awesome.
This was awesome.
This was awesome.
I know I probably speak for Greg. I could have talked to you all day.
Oh, I have so many more questions. I know you do, Mike.
Yeah, and another pot of coffee brewing, you know. So I mean, we could be here till
I'm not eating for a week now.
Yeah. Kyle, thank you so much. It is a true honor, pleasure to speak with you and sharing your insights. It was a real pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, boys. That was awesome.
Yeah, we really can't thank you enough. We respect your time, and we're definitely going to do a part 2. So
Definitely.
we'll talk offline about that.
Yeah.
But thank you very much, and tell everybody where they could find all your stuff.
Yeah. So right now, the main place we've been focused a lot on Instagram. So the Panda Man official. I think that we changed our YouTube to that as well now, but that's the main way. And I try to respond to all my DMs. It's me. It's not a bot. It's just it's me in there. And so after this, I'll get in there and shoot messages to people. And so the Panda Man official on Instagram. And obviously we're on Facebook and all that, but that would be the main place right now.
Awesome. I appreciate it. And I just want to give a shout out like we always do. We usually do it in the beginning. All the military personnel, stay safe out there. And thank you for your service.
Yep. And a shout out to our cops, our firemen, our EMTs, our first responders. Thank you for keeping our communities and our states safe.
Yes.
Awesome. Listen, enjoy your week. Thank you again. And we will see the Panda Man again.
Absolutely. Signing off from the very free state of Florida. Panda Man, it was an honor.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Kyle.
God bless.
All right.